Okay, so now we're going to pick up where we left off from in the previous video, and we're going to create a second table, the orders table, and relate it to the first. And along the way, we're going to talk about database diagrams. Okay, so a little added bonus there. So let's do this. We're going to go to our Database Explorer. I'm going to right-click on the Tables folder, just like we did previously, and click Add New Table. And I'm going to be quiet now as I create the definition for the orders table. Okay, so I think we're ready to go here. Just to kind of talk through what I did. Create an orders table with an order ID, which is both an identity column and will be used for my primary key for the table. Got a order amount of type small money, an order date of type small date time, and I used, kind of from that previous video, the get date function in SQL Server in order to get the current date, so I don't have, if I don't supply one, then today's date will be used. A fulfilled function with a default value of 0, meaning false, and then a customer ID, which we're going to use as the foreign key to our primary key corollary in the customers table. Okay, and so we can now see it here in our tables folder in our Database Explorer. All right, so now we can move on to the next order of business, which is to create a relationship between those two tables. There's actually a couple of different ways that we can go about doing this. In my personal opinion, the easiest way is to take a little bit more of a visual approach. And so what I'm going to do is go and create a database diagram, and we'll talk about database diagrams for a minute or two, and then I'll show you how to make that foreign key constraint between the two tables. So I'm going to right-click on Database Diagrams. I'm going to select Add New Diagram. You might get a message say, do you want to add those objects that are not currently present in order to create a database diagram? Just go ahead and select yes, you do. At any rate, the table Add Table dialog pops up, and you can select one or more of the tables that you want in your diagram. I'm going to hold down the Shift key on my keyboard and select both tables and select Add. And I'm going to click the Close button. Okay, so here is the default view for my diagram. Just a couple of things to note. First of all, I can change, the magnification level on my tables. Probably stick at about 75%. All right, also, especially if you have a large diagram, this feature comes in handy. This little navigation here, when I click on it, it pops open a little window that allows me to move around. Let's change this to like 150, and it'll become more obvious as I scroll around. You can see that I'm able to navigate through it. That's a neat way to do it. Also, since this is a diagram, what I can create is an annotation. And so I'm going to select, just right-click and select Add New Text Annotation, or I can click it here in this little toolbar, and I'm going to type in Acme Customer Orders Database. Just a little note, because after all, this is a diagram. And since it's a diagram, it can be printed, right? So there are these little buttons here that allow you to view the page breaks. This would be more relevant if we had more tables. What you don't want is to have your tables, the tables graphically falling off to the side or being split between the page breaks. So what you can do is then click this button to arrange the table so that everything fits nicely within the diagrams and within the borders of the page breaks. Okay, so we're not going to be printing our diagram. We're just using it for a different type of purpose. But there's a lot of functionality here in this diagram. In fact, if you right click, you can actually create a new table right from here. You can choose the table name, let's call it order items, click OK, and you can actually now create a whole new table right here. So order item ID, whoops, call this int, and we're going to also create a an order ID int, and we may even use that later, who knows. I can give it a primary key. I can set it up here in the properties window to be an identity column. Okay, and then once I'm done, I can hit the save button and it will save my new table. We'll just call it diagram 2. Yes. Okay. So now everything is saved and I have another table. Another thing is you can see that here in this new table, I'm able to view the data type and whether or not to allow nulls, but my old tables don't have that. Well, if I select them both by multi-select, just draw a lasso around the other two tables and right click, I can select the table view. And so the standard table view will include the data type and whether or not to allow nulls. There are other views though as well. I can only view the column names like before. I can view just the keys. So if I just wanted to get a high level overview of what tables were related and how they were related, I could choose that view. Similarly, if I just wanted to see what tables were available, I could just choose the name only, which would just give me the table names and how they're related. And or I can select this custom view, which allows me to modify the custom view to include those properties of each column that we might find important for our particular diagram. Now, another thing to keep in mind here is that this is simply a diagram. It's a view into our entire database table design. So we can choose, just like we do with UML, to only represent those entities, in this case tables, that are pertinent to a particular view or slice of functionality or a conversation that we're going to have with a coworker. And so we can, you know, with 3 tables, not a big deal, right? But when you have 100 tables, you might want to pare down all the tables that are possible to only look at those tables that involve the ordering system or the marketing system or whatever the case might be. Okay, so this is a mechanism to do it. You just create multiple diagrams, each with an insight into just a subset of the tables, or you can add them all. That's fine too. So let's go ahead and arrange the tables, because now I have some overlapping tables here. I'm going to click Arrange Tables one more time, and now you can see all 3 tables. Great. Okay, so let's save what we've done so far. And now that I've created the diagram, and I think that's pretty much all that I wanted to do with it, what I want to do is show the relationship, or how to create that foreign key constraint between the orders table and the customers table. So I have this customer ID field, which is a foreign key, and I want to relate it to the primary key, customer ID, in the customers table. That's what we've been building up to. So I'm going to select it, drag it, and you can see as I'm dragging, there's a little line to my mouse cursor, and I'm going to drop it on the customer table. I'm going to aim for that customer ID. I'm not so sure it really matters, but I'm going to aim for it anyway. And now what pops open, first of all, is gives us the ability in this dialog to make sure we're selecting the right related fields. So the customer table customer ID field should be related to the order table's customer ID field. That looks right, so I'm going to click OK. And then before it actually creates the relationship, then it's going to say, all right, here's the name of the identity. I'm sorry, the name of the constraint is called FK for foreign key constraint. Orders customers, that's fine. I can look at some of the other options for this new relationship, which aren't really pertinent right now, but might be pertinent later on. So let's reserve a conversation. Just accept the default values here and select OK. And once I do that, you can see now we have a relationship between these 2 tables. The key on this hand means that this is the table with the primary key, and the little chain on the other side means that this is the table that has the foreign key. And so if I hover over, you already saw a little pop-up that gives us the name of that relationship, FK underscore orders underscore customer, which is a relationship between customers and orders. which is very helpful. I can also right-click that relationship and delete it, or get back to the property dialog, or at least the property window in this case, for that particular relationship. All right, so I'm going to save it, and now we're going to look at the ramifications of what we just did by creating this orders table. I'm going to close this down, and now what I want to do, let's open up and show the table data from previously. Hey, look, I learned how to spell coyote. You learn something every day, right? Hey, I lived in the city my whole life. I never needed to type the word coyote, not for a book report or anything as a kid. Sorry. Okay, so then also orders. I'm going to open that up as well. I'm going to keep in mind that I have a customer ID of 1 for Wile E. Coyote and 3 for Bugs Bunny. So I'm going to right-click orders, and we are going to show the table data here as well. And I'm going to start typing in some new orders. So the order amount on this first order will be $20. The order date, I'm just going to leave it empty and see if our default value actually worked. Same thing with our fulfilled value, just to make sure, because I'm a little bit iffy on this one. And the customer ID, we'll make it for Wile E. Coyote. We'll type in the number 1. And nothing seemed to work. Well, apparently I defined something incorrectly here. So let's go back, close this down. Well, actually, let's delete that. Oh, wait a second. So there's a little bit of a bug here. You can see that it actually did, in fact, put my properties in. It just had a refresh issue. Maybe that's a beta bug. I hope it is. All right, let's move on. So let's create another order, 15, and we'll leave the, well, let's go ahead and set the order date since we can't rely on that. False here. And then customer ID number 2, and it's going to give me an error. Why? Because we do not have a customer with a customer ID of 2. So it checked that relationship between orders and customers, saw that I didn't have a parent record, a customer record with the ID of 2, and so it pops up this error message which says there's a conflict with the foreign key constraint FK order customers. The conflict occurred because basically customer ID, there was no corresponding customer for this order to go with. So let's start over again. Instead, we're going to use the number 3 to get to Bugs Bunny's record. And now that'll work. Excellent. Okay, so let's do this now. Let us go over here to the customers table, and let's try to delete Bugs Bunny's row of data. And I'm going to hit the delete button on my keyboard. And it says, hey, you're about to delete 1 row of data. Are you sure you're okay with that? Absolutely. Uh-oh. No rows were deleted because if you parse through this, the delete statement conflicted with the reference constraint FK orders customers on the column customer ID. Okay, so what happened here? The SQL Server is not going to allow there to be an orphaned row in the orders table because we created that foreign key relationship. So at this point, you might be getting tired of hearing what I'm about to say, but we really just scratched the surface of working with tables and columns and records and constraints within SQL Server 2008 Express Edition. So at this point, though, you can kind of get an idea for the rules and the constraints, how they relate to columns and rows and fields, how tables can be related to each other, and so forth. So you might be wondering, what are we going to do with this data? Well, ultimately, what we're working towards here is using a database to persist, or in other words, to permanently store data from the applications that we write. I estimate that about 90% of every application that I am somehow involved with involves a database. So this is a very important skill. And next week, we're going to look at how to enter and retrieve the data into and out of the database using a Windows application. So we're going to be able to represent the data in a grid or in text boxes, be able to make changes and save those changes back into the database. And that's when you're actually going to start seeing all these concepts start coming together into real workable applications. And that's when programming actually, for me, became a lot of fun, when I saw the fruits of my labor and to see that I can build things that people would actually either pay to use or actually use, right? So just hang in there. You needed to have all this foundational information before we can get to that point, but we're almost there. So we'll see you in the next video. Thank you.